right, let's bring him in. Let's talk some Lightning hockey with our guy, Braydon Coburn. Kobe, what's going on, brother? How are you?
I'm doing great, Jay. How are you, buddy?
We're doing well, man. And I'd love to hear your perspective on that when it comes to the Bolts of just how the organization as a whole, they treat the military. They treat, the people that have been stricken with cancer. They treat kids and families and the community. It's something really special, isn't it?
Well, Jay, I think the every coach I've ever played for, they talk about this is our family. You're incorporating your dressing room into your family. And one thing that I think great organizations do, and Jeff Finnick was kind of he's the head of this, is that he says we're a family, but also the community. We're also a family. We live together. And he really took that to heart. And I think when you do that, you have the organization embraces the community, but the community embraces you back. And I think when that happens and you kind of people see that, and it takes time, it's not just something that's going to happen overnight. This has been going on for 15 plus years around here about trying to build this relationship. And I think it's just a very positive thing. And they've just put the people in place to do the job, to make sure that the outreach is there from the ground up, whether it's people in need, and it's just supporting each other. And when boil it all down, that's what it's about.
Kobe, you played for multiple teams in your career, but I remember at the Alex Killorn Ryan McDonough Can Jam event years ago, right there in downtown. And I remember because Mac was all jacked up, he like broke his foot, so he's riding around in a scooter. That was one thing I remember. But I also remember your kids being out there, and they had so much fun. And you, after your playing career, you're still here. Your family's still here. What was that clinching thing that was like, this is where we want to raise our family, this is where we want to be?
Well, there was a couple things. It's the relationships you make when you're playing, and my kids have grown up here. As much as they claim to be half Canadian, they're really they're flow grown as they come. But my wife has made a wonderful life here for us, and just the people that we've met, and that it's special because our family is back home in Western Canada, and we did not take the decision to settle here and raise our kids here lightly.
Right.
But we just felt like the community and what we needed as a family, and just a place to raise a family, was the perfect scenario. And it's just been it's been fantastic.
Yeah, and we're glad you're here. You're doing such a great job there on FanDuel Sports Network with whoever it is you're working with, but with our guy Paul Kennedy as well.
Paul's the best.
He's the
Just like
best, man.
he's the ultimate gentleman. It's like one of those guys you look at and you just like, I don't know if he maybe somewhere down in there, but under that suit, he's got a bad bone, but not that I can tell. He's just pure class all the time. And just, I've learned so much from him, and so grateful that I get to work with a man like that.
Yeah, he's class personified, man, and he's so articulate, and he's always thinking about different things. And Jay, you should watch Need for Speed on Netflix about F1. And I'm like, Paul, I'm not really into cars. He goes, Jay, trust me, it's fantastic. And then I was like, okay. And then I binge watched like 8 seasons in a row. And I'm like, if Paul Kennedy tells you to do something, you're gonna do it, even if you don't think it's kind of in your wheelhouse. But yeah, he does such a
He's so
great job.
humble. He
He is,
knows,
man.
he's been around sports for a very long time, and he'll tell you he knows nothing about hockey and nothing about football and nothing about basketball, but that couldn't be further from the truth. The guy is just a wealth of knowledge, and he understands people, and he understands the dynamics, and he knows how to build drama. And that's why he's so great as a host and as a coverer of sports.
Yeah, and it's a good segue because I think somebody that really knows people is a guy like Jon Cooper. Getting to know Coop over the last decade or so, and I read a book years ago. Tony La Russa, famous Hall of Fame baseball manager, says every coach is either a master tactician, kind of a riverboat gambler, or like a superhuman psychologist, right? Because you get these former players, and you're like, all right, well, they can tell you about the experience of the game. Then you have these X's and O guys. But then you have guys that are just like personally, they can motivate you. And it just seems like Coop is that guy where he's not afraid to mix up the lines. He's not afraid, like we saw last year or 2 years ago, to sit Pointer, Stammer, and Cooch like in Vancouver. He just doesn't, he finds a way. What part does he have to play in the way that this team has played this year? I mean, we know Gensel, we know how great, Cooch and Point and Vasi and Hetty and those guys are, but in what way has Jon Cooper made an impact on this team this year that has allowed them to especially be as good as they've been in the last, 4 games where they, get 6 points out of 8 on a road trip that sometimes can give some people some issues?
Well, I think the number one thing with Coop is that he's authentic. The guy you see in the dressing room is the same guy that's you find on the street, and it's just him. He's been able to have success by being himself. And a lot of guys feel like when they walk into that dressing room as a head coach, they have to become somebody else, and they step outside of maybe their personality. And I think Coop is very authentic in the fact that who he is and who you see is the coach he is. And the other thing about Coop that I've noticed when I played and through the course of the years that I played for him was he changed. He changed his he was adaptable. He's flexible in the way he runs his team, the way he treats people, and he's able to find what the team needs and then and I guess basically deploy that strategy. And he's not set in his ways about, just because I was coached this way 40, 50 years ago, this is how it's going to be run. He's very knowledgeable about how to manage people and let people do his job. And he's not a taskmaster by any means. He lets um, guys, his staff is as connected as I've seen any coaching staff before. He's got a longtime assistants in Jeff Halpern and Zettler and Blashill, and these guys they carry they do a heavy job. And Coop's not a micromanager. He is responsible for the team at the end of the day, but he lets these guys play to their strengths and coach to their strengths. And I think the team really responds because the message coming out of there is a unified message, and his message is consistent, and it's very responsible based and accountability based, and players appreciate that at the end of the day when that's the fact.
One of, if not the longest tenured member of the Lightning organization is a good buddy of ours in Nigel Kerwin, video coach. Him and Brian Garlick do such a
Is he
fantastic
not the
job.
longest ever? Day one is pretty long.
I know, it's pretty funny, right? And the one of the best parts about it is that Nigel used to be a ball boy for the Buccaneers when our good buddy Ian Beckles was playing for the Buccaneers. So it's just kind of a weird, like, he's been around Tampa Bay sports for a ton of time. What is Nigel's role? Because we always think, I think for like the layman's, they think like, all right, when a goal goes in and they think it's offside or they challenging goalie interference, that's when Nigel's on. But it's so much more than that. So for a guy that, and it's so great because the Tampa Bay area, like they really do show love to Nigel every year. Home opener, he gets one of the loudest applauses for anybody. What does Nigel and Brian do from like when you were there, like on a game day? How does he help the team outside of just, challenges and things like that?
Well, he's been there since day one, and you'd never know because he's going to serve the rookie coming up that maybe wants some extra clips, and he'll go to the depths of whatever you need to find those clips to help that player become better. But he's just a down to earth guy. Him and Brian Gerlach, they do a fantastic job. It's fun sometimes to sit in that war room when the game's going on and they got the headsets on and they're talking back and forth. They have a little bit of their own language in there about the way they're going to call things, and they're constantly checking offsides, checking different things, and clipping different segments of the game at the same time. It's an art form for sure. They're not just sitting back pushing a button for sure. They're definitely engaged in what's happening. And then this part about they're a part of the staff. They're part of what happens with the pre-scouts. They're a part of what happens with player evaluations. And Jon Cooper has been able to do that, and he gives those guys a voice. So I think when you do that and you empower that, and you have 30 years of hockey knowledge in Nigel and Brian Gerlach, he's got a truly he really has a great hockey mind as well. So those guys are valuable assets, and they get their opinion matters in that coach's room.
Our Tampa Bay Lightning going on the road after that 8-1 win 2 Thursdays ago against the Sharks. That was a nice way to send the guys off. Win in Vancouver, you lose a tough one 2-1 at Edmonton, then you absolutely blast the Flames and the Seattle Kraken. Over these last 4 games, kind of what is the big thing that stood out to you, Kobe, about this Bolt squad?
Well, right away, the fact that they have overcome adversity from injuries. The talk about this team was, hey, they're very top heavy. And that was kind of the narrative right from the beginning. If any of the top players are injured, And we've seen top players on this team be injured throughout the year. And I've been, it hasn't always been wins, but I've been very encouraged the fact that when Victor Hedman goes down or when Point is under the lineup or Kucherov's under the lineup, this team has responded. And it's not easy to go to the West and play teams. And, frankly, I think Seattle's had a fairly good year. Calgary's had a good year on paper. Vancouver and Edmonton, those are not easy places to go in and play. And this was very encouraging, very good road games. And I think that the fact that you see guys come into the lineup flying from across the country, from Syracuse to show up and then contribute, it's a good testament to the organizational strength of this team and the fact that they can have the ability to integrate guys early. And it's kind of like last year too. We saw last year, anytime there was a young guy that was injected into the lineup, it seemed like there was like a renewed energy on the team. And there was almost like this energy bump from the young guys that came up. And I think that is something that the management recognizes and understands, and they really lean into, especially when there's the next man up kind of mentality with injuries.
In your career, whether it was with the Lightning or another team, who was that one rookie that came in that made the biggest impact?
Well, I don't know. I talked about this a few weeks ago when Dallas was in town. And I remember Anthony Cirelli's first game. It was in Dallas, and I didn't know a whole lot about Anthony, and just a wonderful person. Everything I've learned about him since, and the battles and the friendships we've created since then. But stepping into that first game, and he scores 2 goals, and we're just all looking at each other like, this kid's not going back to Syracuse. This is no way. So he brought a different energy, and the way he played the game was so responsible from a rookie player, and it was just it was something else. But that's a guy that comes to mind right away.
Yeah, I remember that first postseason. He was a rookie, and he had the most penalty killing time at anybody in the NHL. I was like,
Isn't that remarkable?
that
Yeah.
doesn't happen. That the first word that comes to mind when something like that happens is trust. Like, you just don't get that opportunity to be out there and be the first guy over the boards when you're a man down, unless the coach has the ultimate trust in you. And that that translates into what we're seeing now in the next couple of weeks when we see the Four Nations with him and Hagel making the team. I mean, I know a lot of people, when they were predicting these rosters, they put the 12 best forwards and the 6 best defensemen and 3 best goalies, but they don't realize that, like, you need penalty killers. You need guys that are going to be okay with playing a bottom 6 role. I mean, just speak about Cirelli. We know Point, the reason why Point made it, but Cirelli and Hagel, the impact those guys have had to Jon Cooper trust them enough to play in a best on best tournament, and they're going to see their fair share of time.
They sure will. They'll be there. They'll be the checkers, and they'll be fine with whatever role you give them. But there's no substitute for hustle. And those guys, they never take a shift off. And I think really what the one thing that separates those two guys than a lot of guys is their hockey IQ is just through the roof. Their ability to be able to understand what the other team is doing and put themselves in the right position and make up time and space and put themselves in a position where, maybe they're not going to have the most points. Maybe they're not going to be in a spot where you look up on the top 15 and there's those two guys sitting in the assist or goal categories or point categories. But at the end of the day, if there's a metric that you really use that for a guy that played a complete 200 foot game, those guys would be, 1 and 2 in the league, just because of how they approach the game and their mentality and understanding what it takes to win.
Yeah, I had Greg Wyshynski on a couple weeks ago on the program, and he was saying, Jay, I don't know if anybody realized this, but Patrice Bergeron retiring kind of opened up that spot possibly for Anthony Cirelli. And I go, I don't know if that's 100% true, but we'll take it. And I'm sure he will as well, because you talk about 200-foot players. I mean, Bergeron he was just fantastic for so many years there for Boston. Good question here. How are the Bolts playing their best hockey without Victor Hedman?
Sometimes when that happens, you simplify your game, and playing a simple game it's an amazing things happen when you do that. And the big problem for any team, and it's always been a problem for the Lightning, but really any team in the National Hockey League, is turnovers. And when you have a young decor and I'll give Ryan McDonough a ton of credit, because he is a guy that has been stepping up in that leadership role when Hetty's out of the lineup and really guiding these younger guys to just what a wonderful way to mentor people. And you watch him play and you say, okay, I can do that. He's not doing anything like overly special, but he's just really good at doing the simple things and blocking shots and having that commitment. So that effect, that trickle down effect throughout the defense is quite fun to watch, and something that I'm not surprised to see. But it really is a simplification of what they're trying to do in the D zone. And I know, I think we've maybe talked about this before, but having that synergy between what's happening in Syracuse and what's happening in Tampa, between the defensive systems and really kind of the overall systems that are being run by Bouchard and Cooper, it makes a difference, and it makes that transition easier for players when they come up.
Yeah, and you've noticed that because on that trip you've played games without Victor Hedman, without JJ Moser, without Eric Chernak, and they're just able to kind of rifle these different guys in there, the Carlisles and Santinis of the world, and it's been able to work out. I want to ask you this because one of my old coaches back in the day, Coach Pyle, lifelong Rangers fan, cannot remember a stretch like this. The only thing I can think of, Drury and Laviolette have lost the locker room due to the treatment of Jacob Trouba. What do you make of a team like the Rangers, Kobe? I mean, this was a team I had them going all the way before the year, just because you have the goalie, you have star players, you got good blue liners. But man, they have been atrocious. They trade their captain. I mean, don't be the captain of the Rangers because they'll trade you. I was surprised they didn't trade him in the Lightning like Mac and Callie. But I mean, what do you make of the Trouba situation? What do you make of what's going on with the Rangers? Because when you look at it on paper, I mean, you got all-stars, you got guys that are 40 goal scorers, and it's like oil and water with that club this year.
Well, first off, Peter Laviolette was one of my favorite coaches that I ever had. I played for him in Philly, and I think he's just a fantastic guy, and he wears his emotions on his sleeves. And um, like you, I'm very surprised this Ranger team has played the way they have this season. But it just goes to show, sometimes when things start going the wrong way and the snowball starts rolling downhill, it can be very, very hard to stop. And especially when there's high expectations in a market like New York, where I think they were thinking not just make the playoffs, they're thinking win the Stanley Cup. It can be tough. And players feel that eventually, especially when things start going sliding as much as they have. And you're not getting the offensive contributions. The defense has been porous, and you're looking around saying, what's the problem? And we got to make changes. And it's a tough thing there. And it's just one of those things where, you're looking for moves, and the fact that Trouba is the captain, and they do trade him, and they think that might be the case. And I think maybe they had tried trading him earlier in the year, and
In the offseason, yeah.
he had blocked the trade with his no trade clause. So there's kind of some things there, and it's tough. You need your team to be able to lean on your captain, and when you've tried to trade him and he blocked the trade, it's not an ideal situation for that New York Ranger hockey club.
No, it isn't. And yeah, they try to trade him in the offseason. He's got the no trade clause. His wife, I believe, is in medical school. And I mean, this is why you work to get that no trade clause in there. The same thing happened with our buddy Barclay Goodrow. And they said, all right, well, we're going to waive you, and then you're going to go to a bad team, but go to San Jose. And he's like, I don't want to go to San Jose. They're like, well, we're trading you to San Jose. So I just wonder how that whole thing is going to shake out. Last thing for me, what do you think of the Four Nations face-off? Ryan B wants to know.
I'm excited. I'm excited to watch it. It's going to be fun just to see the way this is all kind of been worked together. I have to say, one of my favorite hockey memories outside of Stanley Cup playoffs was as a kid watching the World Cup. I loved watching that. I remember going to my friend Matt Nelson's house and sitting in his living room and watching Canada versus US, and the emotions that we had, and watching Chris Chelios cross-check guys, and Tony Amante, and the Canadians, and Eric Lindros, and Wayne Gretzky, and all those guys. It was fantastic. And the only thing I really wish that I know there's this whole geopolitical scene, but man, it would have been nice to see a Team Russia in there. It just, you think about our game's best players, and the fact that, you're not going to watch Nikita Kucherov go up against the best Canadians or the best Americans or the Finns and the Swedes. It's too bad. But I also understand that there's bigger issues at play there.
Yeah, it's kind of wild for all the years that, and Ilya Bryzgalov for a while was like really the only kind of big name Russian goalie. And now you look at it and you can argue that they have four guys that deserve with Vazzy, Shesterkin, Bob, and Sorokin. So it's
And
kind of wild.
Canada, you look at their goaltending situation, and it's probably fair to say it's as thin as it's ever been
Yeah.
in the history of international play. We've always had a big superstar to lean on, and this is the year where you're looking at the three guys and you're like, I don't necessarily know who the starter is, and
Mhm.
not for the fact of like, you really just don't know, because those guys are not guys that jump off the paper and say true number one superstar in the net for your team that you're going to look for. So that's going to be interesting. And the Russians, obviously we know about them, but the Americans, I think, are in a very good spot. They have a lot
Yeah.
of goaltending depth as well. And I think that's going to be a real strength for their team.
Yeah, Hellebuck, Ottinger, and Swayman is a pretty good triumvirate of goalies to have there. And we've been waiting for many years to see Austin Matthews on the big scale against Connor McDavid. I mean, it's going to be crazy. Like, who do we root for, right? I mean, we got
Well,
Cooper,
I know who
Cirelli, we
I'm
got
rooting
Ken.
for,
I know you,
but
but it's like, for me as a kid that grew up on Long Island, playing hockey, and I'm going to be rooting against Jon Cooper for the first time in my life. That's going to be kind of weird.
yeah, no, it's going to be fun to watch, and I think that just to being able to do this, and it's going to serve a great precursor to
Yeah.
what's going to happen a year from now in the Olympics as well.
I'm gonna probably wear red, white, and blue crazy colored shoes for Jon Cooper just to talk some smack, because you know how I roll with the crazy shoes. So
Oh, well, I think maybe there's a bet in there somewhere, Jay, that you
yeah,
gotta get rolling in.
man, you read my mind. The one and only Braydon Coburn, Kobe. I appreciate your friendship and your time today, my friend. Keep up the great work, and have a great holidays, man. We'll talk soon.
You too, buddy. Thanks for having me on.
You got it.